Get ready for another episode of The Awake Space. I'm Lori Rivers, your host. And this is where you come for inspiration to help you with your aspirations and get some of the most important astrological information you can find on the internet to make sure you're up to date with the latest going-ons up there, because as above, so below. It's July 6th, and this is a very special episode of the Awake Space podcast. I'm Lori Rivers, your host, and today I have a special guest. Medium Carrie Wilson joins me for a very fascinating conversation about the difference between being a medium and being an astrologer, and how we interact with our clients, and some ethics discussion. There's ethics involved when you work with people, and we talk about that, compare some notes, and sing each other's praises. I've known Carrie for quite a few months now. We met on TikTok. She booked me for a reading, and it was a remarkable experience for both of us, and I often seek her counsel and guidance as well. So I hope you enjoy that. Carrie is also one of my patrons. So I want to celebrate her patronizing me, and I would love it if you went to the links in the description and followed her. And if you're seeking an evidential medium, I mean somebody who can back stuff up and prove they're picking stuff up out of nowhere, make sure you book a session with Carrie. She is absolutely fantastic and very, very accurate. So what else are we going to have on the show? I'm going to talk a little astrology, not too much because this is already a long episode. She and I could have probably talked half the day. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the latest development in the T-square. So we've moved away from Mars, and now Venus is up at bat. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that means in the next segment. And we'll do our patron shout-out. Obviously, Carrie is the biggest shout-out because I interviewed her. But we'll name names and thank people. And I think that's about it. So, on with the next segment. Let's talk about that T-square real quick, and then I'll let you listen to the interview with myself and Carrie. Oh boy, don't we live in interesting times. So let's talk about that Venus, Saturn, Uranus T-square. So, yeah, I was just talking about a T-square in the last episode, but that one was Mars, Saturn, and Uranus. And so now we're looking at Venus, Saturn, and Uranus. And you'd think if you just looked at surface level astrology, you'd be like, oh, well, it's Venus, so that'll be okay. And whereas a Venus transit in general is not harshly malefic, meaning it's usually not as bad as like a Mars transit, these are coming so close together. And with the moon in Gemini right now, so the moon is square Jupiter as this T-square forms. And it'll be square Neptune as the T-square is pretty exact. Yeah, this is volatile energy. We're looking at values being challenged. And I think we're all seeing our values challenged. The people have been coming out en masse for years. This isn't even a this year thing or a last year thing. I know there's a whole bunch of new people awakened, but the funny thing about being awakened means you were asleep. So you may have missed those of us out there for the last, 40, 30 years, 50 years out there trying to make change. But there's more volume now. There's more people doing it. And I have to say, instead of being bitter and annoyed, I'm like, at first I will say, my first thought was, oh, now? Now, finally? It's getting a little close, guys. But I will say, when the people went out into the streets last year, it made my heart happy. It was good to see that many people that diversely be out there. Was it the end? No, and don't stop. See, that's the problem. We stopped. And it doesn't matter who is in office, and don't get me wrong, it does matter. But on one hand, it doesn't, because we need policy changes. And those are changed in a multitude of ways. You can only do so many executive orders. And as much as we have to undo 2016 to 2020, we still have systemic issues that need addressing. And if you hadn't noticed, those aren't all being addressed. So Venus opposing Saturn is kind of indicative of that kind of energy. It's Venus rules what you value. And yeah, it can be money, it can be luxury, since it's Leo, gold, precious metals, precious stones, status symbols. Wealth is at odds with the restructuring of society, because Saturn in Aquarius rules people power, and instead of dictatorial or over authoritarian power. And in reverse, it means the people's will is not being recognized. So you have our values and the system itself at odds. And, if you think about it, the system itself isn't actually broken. It's working as designed. And it's the system itself that needs to be restructured. And so this pressure is building. And then square Uranus in Taurus, and Taurus is ruled by Venus. Venus ruling things we value, things that make us feel secure, and Uranus is the planet of disruption. And so everything that makes us feel secure is being disrupted. We have to innovate, we have to adapt, we have to learn to communicate, collaborate, and play. And this is all under pressure. Squares and oppositions are all about decisions. So on a personal level, this is changing you on the inside as much as it's making things very, very chaotic on the outside. And we have to do the interchange in order to impact the outer world. Because why? Because all decisions happen from the inside. Okay, so if you decide you're going to eat clean, then you're deciding internally before you decide where you're going in your car, right? So you don't just suddenly autopilot not to McDonald's. You go somewhere you can get fresh food, right? So these internal structures have to change. This is internalized misogyny, internalized misandry, internalized racism, internalized, recognizing our privilege, and then dismantling blame, shame, and guilt, because those paralyze you. Dismantling religious beliefs. One of the biggest things I think that we're suffering from in the spiritual community is that people will leave the church and then bring their baggage with them. I talk a little bit about that in the interview with Carrie, and then in the final segment. And it's important to recognize what you're bringing with you. Most people haven't really studied theology or comparative religions. So you're not thinking about what it is. It just seems true to you because that's what so many people talk about, so many people believe. And if we collectively say it is, isn't it so? Well, let me tell you a quick little story. It's a good teaching story. So if my freshman year, I was in algebra, and our teacher was up at the board, Mr. Owens. I owe him a lot. Mr. Owens was writing this equation on the board, and I think it was A plus B equals X or C. But it was a revising of what we'd learned in junior high school, right? But as he was writing on the board, I had a Uranus transit moment. It was like lightning hit my brain. And I watched him write the symbols and talk about it, and almost his voice almost muffled. And this electric impulse hit me like a Mack truck. And I raised my hand and said, "Mr. Owens." And he turned around. And I must have looked white as a sheet. And I said, "That's not real. It's made up." And he looked at me and he was like, "What do you mean?" I said, "That's made up. That's not real. What if everything's made up and isn't real?" And it was obvious I was not on drugs. I just happened to have Neptune in the first house. Okay, I don't need drugs. And he said, "Explain it another second, Lord. Just tell me one more thing." And I said, "So what if X isn't X? What if X is B? And what if B isn't B? And what if that green color isn't green? What if it's actually called purple? What if we're wrong? What if we're wrong? Somebody made this up and said it was real and everyone believed him. But what if it's wrong?" Now, at that point, I could have gotten in trouble. But Mr. Owens was a very smart man and an actual mathematician. I got really lucky. And he said, "Lori, I want you to hold on to that thought. And I want you to understand these are called assumed truths. We're going to assume it works because there is a system in place and we can replicate this over and over. So you're not wrong, but we're going to operate on the fact that this is assumed truths. And if you talk to me after class, I'll explain more. But this is going to get confusing for everybody, and we're doing algebra." So he did a great job, by the way, of classroom management. He didn't make me wrong. He explained why things were, but he also tried very hard not to confuse the rest of the class as my little brain was going overboard. And I honestly don't remember the rest of that class because my brain was chewing on the fact that everything was made up. Every word, every idea, every belief I had was made up. It was very terrifying. And after class, he asked me to come to him, and I was afraid I was going to be in trouble. And he said, "Lori, you are a really, really bright student." And I said, "Yeah, I know." And he said, Have you read Einstein? Have you read anything about him?" And I said, "Well, I read his biography." And he goes, "But have you read his math?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not really fond of math." He goes, "Well, you're really good at it." And I was like, "How did what I do become math?" And he explained. He goes, "Well, Einstein thought the same way as you. And when you go to college, I want you to study experimental math," which I didn't do. I didn't promise I would do, but math was kind of a dirty word for me. And, but it was validating. And he goes, "You're right. It is made up. And we've all agreed to it." I'm like, "Yeah, but what if it's wrong?" And he goes, "Well, we keep proving it out, so it isn't wrong." And I said, "But what if it's morally and ethically wrong?" And he got where I was going. And I know he sent me to some philosophical resources to go read. I don't remember what they were, but I know I spent a lot of time in the library. And so this is what I want you to understand. A lot of the things we believe as a culture and a society to be correct and right and true are not true. And you don't know which things are true and not true until you assess it inside of you and know what your truth actually is. And when you do that, when you know what your truth is inside of you, you are no longer subject to propaganda, indoctrination, cult indoctrination, partisanship. You become more self-determinant. And that is what this T-square is asking us all to do. It's going to hurt and be confusing and suck in a million different ways. But we are being asked to dismantle what we consider our reality and disrupt it and create a more honest and true reality on an individual level so that we can meet the challenges on a collective level. Not everybody's going to believe the same thing, and a whole bunch of people can have a whole bunch of different kinds of truths. And you have to feel into it. If you're feeling hate, and I'm not saying anger, I'm saying abject hate. If you're feeling murderous, I think there's a couple of things we can all agree on that in general, it's not a good idea going around, unlifing people. But is that always the case? Is it always bad? And is death actually bad in and of itself? I don't have the answers for you. I can give you astrological information. It's one of the reasons in unpacking these things that I teach interpretation a little differently. I teach that it expresses on many different vibrations, all of those vibrations are valid and true. It's just, what would you rather experience? So if you're a patron, feel free to ask me questions about this in the general chat on Discord. I'm going to leave it at that, but just know that your beliefs, your values, everything you do in life is being disrupted for a reason. We need to make radical change very quickly with climate change coming up and other things. We don't have time for 100 years to pass for us to change our values and what we believe is good and right and true. So assess that stuff, guys. And instead of having a drama crisis moment, come into the Discord, ask for help, get support. There's ways to move with this energy so that you're in your power. I know it's hard. I'm going through it too. All right, next segment. Hey, it's the patron shout out section of the podcast. First of all, I want to thank my very special guest today and patron medium, Carrie Wilson. She's absolutely fantastic. Absolutely adore her. Amazing. Special shout out also to Christina, who is amazing. She's known as Absolute on our Discord server. And she is a second pair of hands for me right now. Totally appreciate her help. And then I want to welcome Brooke, Carista, Megan, Molly, Tracy, Jenny, Anonymous Spiritual, Jennifer, Annie. Let's see, who else? Let me get back here. Bud. Got Bud in there. Nicole. Hannah. I've got another Hannah Grather as well. Big shout out to Iris. And I think, let's see, Jasmine. I think we're good. I think that's all the new people. There'll be more. Besides, this is a crazy month, so I'll be podcasting a little bit more. And it's my birthday month. So hey, save $55 on natal readings. Those are the personal readings on my website. Link is in the description. Save $55 with your special code. Thanks. Hello.
Hey.
So we have the delightful medium, Carrie Wilson. How you doing, Carrie?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So we can either chit-chat right now. Let's just chit-chat for a second, and then, we don't want to do that shit. Fuck. I can trim it. It's fine. Okay. We can talk for a minute, and then I'll trim it. I remembered I can trim audio on here. So.
I'm just tickled. Shit, fuck.
Right? Me and my sailor vocabulary.
That's the best of them, sentence enhancers.
Indeed.
Do you hear any like background noise or anything like that?
A little bit, but I'll put music behind the audio.
Okay.
That helps it. I'm
Because
outside.
it is hot as 400 hell here.
I
I
understand.
bet you it's nearly 80 degrees in the house because my house isn't insulated properly.
Mm,
So I'm burning up.
I understand. That's why I'm outside. So, is there anything you want to highlight or talk about?
Um, oh God, not really. I don't guess because I don't know exactly what I'm doing. I mean,
Well, that's
you
okay.
know,
But what do you wish people knew about you?
um, oh, I'm trying to think. Oh God, some people have the notion that kind of like I can see all their dirty little secrets, you
Okay.
know. Um, and of course, it don't work that way, or that I'm going to judge them, or I don't know. Sometimes I go back to, being in the South and this is a sin or da da da. But that can be touchy, you know. Um,
Oh, we
oh,
touch on everything here, so it's okay.
I mean,
I know where I'm going to go with it now.
okay.
So let's go give it to the 2:20 mark. All right, guys, we have the delightful medium Carrie Wilson. How are you today, Carrie?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I am doing excellent. So, you are an evidential medium. Is that correct? Did I say that right?
Yes, ma'am. Evidential medium.
So, can you tell me a little bit about what exactly does that mean? Like, how does that make you different as a medium?
Well, with evidential mediumship, you are kind of trained to bring in the meat and potatoes of the reading. So, you may sort of go to a regular medium and she tells you, "Oh, your grandmother's telling me she likes to cook." Whereas you go to an evidential medium and they say, "Oh, your grandmother liked to cook, and gawumpki was her favorite meal, and she had this special ingredient she put in it." So it's evidence based communication with spirit to, in a way, prove you're connected to spirit and prove that life continues after so-called death. It's not limited to certain kind of information. Of course, you tried names, dates, birthdays, just evidence based information.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So, which is interesting because as an astrologer, people often expect an astrology reading to go the same way as a meeting with a medium, and whereas you're trying to prove you're connected,
Yeah.
I'm translating timing. So I
Yeah.
always say I may not dazzle you with what I tell you, other than you may have never told another living soul.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the two are different. That's why I wanted to have you on here, because I want people to understand the difference between all these different modalities. On one hand, they're related, kind of, because
Mm-hmm.
humans are curious. And on the other hand, we operate a little bit differently.
Yeah.
And I've used you as a medium for me, and you're freaking accurate AF.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's
Thank
mind blowingly so. Knocked my socks off a couple times.
Oh
So,
goodness. I appreciate that so much.
yeah,
I'm
but
like, if you could see me, I'm beat red.
yeah, but you are. It's truth. I mean, it's like crazy cool. Um, what's what a lot of people have misconceptions of both divination arts. Um, what are some of your fun, like the funniest ones, like when people what they expect out with a medium?
um, well, it's not really comical, I don't guess. I mean, it can be sometimes, but some people come to you and they're in a way just terrified that I'm going to be able to pull out all the skeletons in their closet, and you know it doesn't really work that way. So
Right.
you find yourself explaining that a lot, or they have this kind of preconceived conditioning of psychics and mediums aren't to be meddled with, and so they're stepping out of their comfort zone to contact you in the first place. So you have to come to it into it really, really gentle, or sometimes people are scared that, like they have attachments and different things like that, but
Mm-hmm.
so it's not necessarily comical, but in a way, it kind of can be. That is such a terrible sense of humor. I know, I know it is, and I always approach it with gentleness because
Right.
I remember being that person.
Right.
But it's just like, baby, you don't have anything to be scared of. Like I'm not gonna bite you unless you want me to. You
Right,
know.
right, exactly. Yeah, yeah. And that's another difference because I can see everybody's dirty laundry in their
Yeah.
chart, but I also walk very cautiously. I think we have young readers out there who want to prove themselves and they sometimes jump right into that. And those are very
Yeah.
sensitive areas of somebody's life.
Yeah, yeah. And even with
Yeah.
even with psychic work or mediumship, you do sometimes have spirits that come through that want to apologize for certain things. And
Right.
if I feel that right off the bat, I will tell the sitter, which is the person I'm reading for, if anybody comes through that you do not want to speak with, you tell me, and that ends that right there.
Right.
Because it's about the healing
Right.
for the
Right.
and even with psychic work, sometimes you do pick up those little traumas that happen. But the thing is it's almost exactly like you said. You have to have tact with it, and
Right.
there are a lot of sort of psychics out there that they don't hold back, or even just try to reword stuff in a compassionate kind of way. Like
Right.
even in my training, if and I apologize if this is sort of like a no-go to talk about, but even in sort of my training, which has been beneficial, is if you have a spirit that has committed, suicide,
Mm-hmm.
instead of just full blown saying suicide and all this other stuff,
Right.
you are taught to have tact and say, okay, this spirit is telling me, that he's taking responsibility for his passing.
Right.
So it's a gentler blow than, just outing it, if that makes sense.
Right, right. Well, I think delivery is everything, and that's why,
Yes,
um, as you know, I walk very cautiously around trauma in a natal reading
absolutely.
because not everybody's ready to talk about it. Some people totally are,
Yeah.
and the people who follow me on TikTok who know when I talk about that I'm trauma informed. I've had clients jump in and say, "Okay, you can talk about it. It's okay," and then we will. But I'm really focused on the healing as well. I
Yeah.
think when I see readers of all kinds, whether it's tarot, psychic, astrology, whatever, going, well, I don't just tell you what you want to hear. Well, I think
Yeah.
there's a big difference between telling the truth and triggering someone.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
tact, I'm
Mm.
with you. And you do, you are straight up. Um, again, in a very accurate kind of way. I know we were in a reading not long ago and I was coming to you for something else. I don't think I was, or maybe I was coming to you. I was trying to make a decision or something. And you got into it right away. And you're like, all right, you're probably not going to want to hear this. But it was exact. I mean, I already knew,
Yeah.
you know, but you
Yeah.
were like so straight up. And to be honest, that particular situation just immediately evaporated because I wasn't putting energy into it anyway.
Yeah. Well,
But but you called it.
that's it's kind of like a damned if you do, damned if you don't. You I try to go into everything with, I am one of them people that I will straight tell you, I am not going to tell you what you want to hear. because I would be doing myself a disservice,
Yeah,
spirit a disservice, and you a disservice.
absolutely.
But I always try to preface before I'm about to say something that's going to seem blunt. Now, this is going to seem blunt, but
Right,
I don't mean it in a bad way. I mean it from a loving space.
right,
So it's, even with that, it takes a lot of practice reading after reading after reading to get that down. It takes a lot of kind of human interaction, even though you're interacting with spirit, you got to learn the ins and outs that way too.
exactly. Yeah, yeah, and know that you can be as careful as you can be, and some people are still going to be freaked out.
Absolutely.
Um, it's always interesting to me because between the movies, which are inherently wrong when it comes to anything metaphysical, they haven't done us any favors.
No,
God,
they
uh,
haven't.
just there's very few, even in books, very
Hmm.
few that ever actually hit anything close to what it's like.
Yeah.
And people are afraid of it because of a lot of religious trauma.
Yes.
And I hit religion right on the head. I know you live in the Bible Belt, and so you have to walk around things differently. I don't.
Yeah.
Um, and I was well churched
Hmm.
as a child. Um, and I'm well studied in world religions, but the dogma that gets put into the spiritual community really needs to go.
Yeah.
It's it's one of my biggest frustrations. I'm going to be speaking out against it more and more because the time is finally here to just say that was created by human beings, you know, and these rules
Yeah.
were meant to control people. But a lot of that fear that it's a sin or that you're working with the devil or what have you. People who are trained like you're trained to know what you're tapping into. Can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about that? Like how do you know the difference?
Well, what do you mean by know the difference?
Know the difference between something useful and something harmful coming in.
Oh, well, I mean, I don't mean to sound like an asshole when I say this, but it's kind of like it's kind of like just common sense.
Mm-hmm.
I try to approach things from, if I was getting a reading from somebody, how would I want them to deliver the information, or how would I want them to handle me, or give me, they'll give me this tough information, or I try to approach things from that standpoint. When I read for somebody,
Right.
you have just all kinds of different situations that come up, and I guess back to the comical thing that happens is I'm so afraid that I'm going to seem like I'm being rude to somebody. And there's this big saying, which is don't feed the medium, right? Which
Right.
means don't feed me information. Like, yeah, I want you to be interactive in the reading if I touch on information, but don't give me anything. My job as an evidential medium is to tell you the information I'm getting from spirit, not you give me the whole backstory. So
Right.
when people start to tell me stuff, I have to go, whoa, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. I swear when I say this, I'm not being rude, but
Right.
baby, do not feed the medium, and then I have to explain it to them, and they just look kind of shocked for a second because I've cut them off. But I always try to say I'm not trying to be rude, but you paid me
Right.
to do this for you. So,
Right.
but you have you have different instances where you tell that to people, and bless their heart, some of them will just sit there just kind of like a statue. Mhm. Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. They're probably
And
Virgo risings. Just
yeah,
letting you
and
know, Virgo risings never give you any gratification. They'll just stare at you like an owl.
and so you have to sort of get used to that too, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell people, in a reading, there's something that happens when we read people called psychic amnesia. And what that is we're bringing through so much evidence, names, dates, of people who have passed, you're
Yeah.
not going to remember all
Nope.
that right then. So I will just straight up tell them, listen, I'm not going to be rude about it, but I'm going to listen to spirit more than I'm going to listen to you, because
Yep.
you can forget,
Right.
and if you're telling me, no, you don't understand this, whatever, da, 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 I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to listen to spirit. But that
Right.
takes so much practice,
Yeah.
and I guess so much confidence in spirit and what I'm doing, to
Yeah.
be like, nah, I can't listen to you, boo,
Right. I
and
get that. I don't really remember readings after I'm done because my
yeah,
brain cannot hold that much information. I feel
hmm,
bad because I'll get readings and I'll be like, I might have read them 3 months ago. And honestly, like looking at the chart fresh, and I'll see it in that moment
yes,
of what they need, you know? So every
yes,
reading is going to be a little bit different because it's going to cover different ground.
hmm,
Because somebody is not in the same space. They're going through different transits. There's different stuff going on. It's a different day. It doesn't mean
hmm,
everything changes. It doesn't. But
exactly,
how they express the energy can change. But speaking of
right.
speaking to spirit, how do you know it's a good spirit versus something up to mischief? You get trained on that?
Okay. Okay, so get ready to for me to ruffle some feathers here. And now let me just say, my experience is my experience, and I'm not saying it to downgrade anybody else's. You can believe what you want to believe. It ain't no skin off my teeth. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But since I was raised in a super super religious background, it just sort of come to me one day that, no longer am I going to believe what I'm told. I'm going to rule or walk or whatever by what I actually experience.
Right.
And so for me, I don't really have a belief in negative spirits, because the way I sort of explain it to people is, you know, somebody that was bad in life, more than likely, they had some sort of mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree? Yeah.
Yeah. Close to
So,
it. Some kind of trauma.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So if if we don't take things like lung cancer with us into the afterlife, then why would we take mental health issues,
Right.
or trauma with us
Right.
in the afterlife?
Right.
So I've never personally experienced any type of negative spirit. Now, in saying that, I have experienced spirit that has a strong energy and is bringing through evidence of how they were in life. Like,
Right.
you were stern, or you were rude, or,
Right.
da 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 da. But that's not how they are now,
Right.
you
I
know?
can confirm that
Yeah.
um, as well because I can talk to dead people. That's not
Yeah.
what I do for a living. I was just born that way. Made my
No.
childhood interesting, but um, once you get rid of the meat suit, you're squeaky clean.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
You are. And talked about American movies and stuff like that haven't helped us any. You know, when I first started out, I've got this friend named Mary, and she would kill me if she knew I called her a wee little Scottish lady. But I used to sit and talk to her for hours about stuff like this. And one of the things that she taught me is, if you go into spirit communication with fear,
yeah.
fear is exactly what you're going to get, because
Yeah.
I don't know, your Aunt Mary Nail could be, swinging some cabinets because she's, I don't know, bored or wanting to get your attention or whatever. And
Right.
you're going to think that you've got, I don't know, a demon in your
Right.
household, when it's your aunt just, trying to pick at you, you
Right.
know. So you can't go into it with fear, and you really have to find your personal power and
Mm-hmm.
set boundaries. And we have to understand that spirit is literally, they're literally just a thought away.
Yeah.
When I first started, I used to lay in bed at night and think about my readings and think about mediumship, and just, because I was so passionate about it. I walked around my whole life just feeling like something was missing. So when it opened up for me, it's still my everything. It's my bread and butter.
Right.
And so what would happen is my mentor's father come to me at about 3 o'clock in the morning one night and sat at the end of my bed and was singing "Long Haired Country Boy." Well, I heard that man say, and now this is how spirit will teach you, or how they work with me anyway. He sung that mess to me for the better part of that night, and then on to a day and a half, until I finally sort of had to find some ass about myself and
Right.
just tell him, go away. You can't just be like, go away, leave me alone. And then, you're putting your feelers out there without even realizing you're doing it. Are you
Mm-hmm.
still there? Are you still there, spirit?
Right. Right.
You really have to get them boundaries down pat, and just like,
Right.
if you woke up in the middle of the night with some disheveled looking drunk dude sitting at the end of your bed singing to you, what would you tell him? you
Right.
would you would bless him out. It's the
Yep.
same thing with spirit. They're clear people in that way, but
Right.
they have some beautiful lessons they teach you, but it's really in how you look at it, and on whether or not it's a negative experience or not. And I've
Right.
just never had a negative experience.
Right, because you've set your channel to that. And I think that's
Yeah.
important for people to understand. You touched on something really important, which is fear is going to get you exactly what you're afraid of.
Yep.
And as I explained before I start most readings, the energy represented in a chart can go in a multitude of ways.
Yeah.
And it's not just evolved or unevolved expression. There's infinitesimal amounts of ways every sign can express
Yeah.
positive and negative. And my experience with the ether, again, and I don't use my abilities much in astrology readings because I'm doing the astrology, it's math.
Yeah.
um I'll use it when there's an issue that I see, and I'll kind of feel into how should I talk about it. you
Mhm.
know I'll intuit that way, but
Yeah.
I don't intuit much. It's mostly just the astrology,
Right.
which is very different. But in my experience psychically, the stuff out there that people are afraid of, if you're tuned to that channel, that's exactly what you're going to get.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
tune your channel to another channel. You're
Right.
not stuck with the same radio station. So you've been trained how to keep yourself tuned to the station you want to be on.
Yeah. It's almost like, you load up with a group of friends and you're going to go to a haunted house. Well, you're expecting to get scared.
Right.
So you're going to feel tingles all over your body and feel like somebody's about to jump out and get you. And
Right.
because you're expecting
Yeah.
to be scared. I do want to mention something that I have found interesting with the astrology readings, because I've had several astrology readings from you as well, because I'm addicted to astrology. I'm trying to learn it my best,
You
but
are doing great learning it. It's a complex subject. You're doing great. Go ahead.
I'm trying. But what what I have found that is so fascinating to me, and what you have said that has stuck with me, is that astrology is reflective. And
Yeah.
so, like I just bought my mother and my sister both astrology readings, and I've both told them, it's reflective. And they're like, well, what does that mean? And I say, well, think of it this way: those little feelings that you feel inside of you, that you already intuitively know, but you don't really know because you haven't built yourself up enough to know it yet.
Right.
That's the kind of, there's some of those juicy bits that come out in astrology readings, and it can be, or kind of correlates in some kind of way, for me anyway, with like psychic readings.
Right.
Sometimes those little juicy nuggets that someone's feeling inside but can't really put their finger on, it comes out, and it can be so empowering
Yeah.
in that way. Well, the first ever reading I had with you, I was questioning, my abilities. Like, I was
Right.
just at that point, like, oh, I don't know if I can do this anymore or whatever. But then it's like I told my mother today, I was like, but when she told me, it's all over your chart. It's like that changed everything for me. Like it's
Yeah.
written in the stars.
Right. And you hadn't I hadn't really seen much of what you did at that time
Hmm.
because you weren't really active on TikTok yet.
No,
So that was a pretty cold reading
yeah, and
because I'm
that's
like,
what,
you realize you're psychic AF, right?
yeah,
And you're like, that's what I do.
yeah.
Yeah.
The impression of my voice, that's amazing. But that's what I told my mom today. I was like, she, with the reading she gave you, she just brought that to the forefront and showed you, hey, yeah, what you have intuitively felt is there. And it's like when Lori told me that, I haven't looked back. So there's so much power
Yeah.
that you give people, and I'm sure you probably realize it, but there's just so much power and upliftment
Yes.
that comes in getting a reading. It's just
Yeah.
fabulous.
Yeah. Well, that's part of my cosmic job is to
Yeah,
teach people how to be themselves,
yeah,
And astrology is a vehicle amongst many that I use. It's
yeah.
the one I have the most fun doing.
Oh yeah. So it's your
But
meat
yeah,
and
you're right.
potatoes.
Yeah, when I found it at 25, it was the one thing that helped everything make sense, and in a life that didn't make sense at all. So it
Yeah,
was because I was, trust me, I was always psychic. I was always afraid to talk about it because it was
yeah.
weird, and still am. I find it really funny on TikTok, a lot of the stuff that's on spiritual talk and witch talk, and there's a lot of misinformation. I'm really glad you're making a series. If you guys are on TikTok, you really need to follow Carrie. I'll have her um, link for TikTok in the description here. Make sure you're following her because she's the real deal, and I'm really really picky. She's so specific that on one of my live streams the other night, if you guys have been watching me, you might have seen that somebody I love very much has come back into my life, and I'm okay with them. I'm okay without them. I'd rather be with them, and so for them to pop up right now during this Mars Saturn Uranus T square, it's a big deal because my progressed Venus, is in my 8th house, so this is a big deal. This is a soul thing. It's a little nerve wracking, but freaking Carrie, you catch his name, like, and put it on the live stream.
yeah. That I surprised myself there.
That was freaking nuts. And trust me, he's not dead. He's very much alive.
Yeah,
Um, but you caught that, and there's no way you would know that. And that was absolutely, like, I really need to go download that live stream and just capture the look on my face when I saw, like, without my reading glasses, even I'm like, are you talking to somebody
and
else?
even that is really fascinating because I think you had just got done talking about how you wish you could capture people's faces during astrology readings when you bring
Right?
through information, and then I'd done that, and I was trying to watch your face, but then also the comments were going by so fast, and it was wow and oh my god and wow, and then bless her heart, this one lady's like, do y'all know each other? And I'm like, oh no. Yeah, we know each other, but not like that. There's no way that, no way I would have known that.
No way you would have known that. In a million years, would you have known that? No. Because honestly, even when I'm talking, notice when I've talked about my dating life, I never name names.
Right. Yeah.
I don't even in our readings. You've
Mhm.
not known their names.
Yeah. No, I haven't.
I give them names like Gentleman X,
Hmm.
Mr. Wonderful. This is Mr. Bossy Pants.
Right. And then I just pull into just he, because
Yeah.
you don't need that, or I don't know. Some people may need the name, and it's not to discredit them in any way, shape, or form, but I don't need a name. I can just feel
Yeah.
into the energy, and I've done a lot of work um, to be able to do that.
Right.
From sitting in online circles,
Right.
and having having somebody in the circle be like, all right, connect with your partner and tell me what kind of tattoos she has and tell me what kind of scars
Right.
she has on her body, and just, you know, and even, you know, I'm a Reiki level 2 practitioner, which I only do it for like friends and family, you know,
Right.
but even that, you're taught how to scan the body and, you
Right.
know, to do
Me
that
too.
energetic
Yep.
stuff
Yep.
without having to have a name, you know?
Right. Right. And normally it wouldn't matter. The confirmation of that name, though, first of all, on the live stream, where that was important, and this is really good for you guys listening to hear, is this is one, a very deep soul connection. And we met when we could meet, basically. And it didn't work out, and it wasn't for lack of any love or wanting, or it was just like it was the only time we could meet, and it sucked timing wise. And we stayed in contact, kind of, and you know, with silences in between, but we haven't seen each other in 4 years. And so when he popped up, I was questioning, like, is this a distraction or is this the right direction? Because I'm actually really happy with my life right now. So, and so for Carrie to pick that up and not tell me to turn my body, he will, by the way,
Yeah.
and has done so, and be like, no, this is the wrong thing. Don't do this. This is terrible. You keep going. This is going to be hurtful. You know, it was none of that. And it was like, okay, I can walk cautiously forward. Because I can honestly tell you, very few people can make me cry. And I have cried a lot of tears over this person. So it is a tender space. Yes, even astrologers are not immune, and neither are psychics, by the way. We
No,
are still in human bodies.
yeah, having the
We
human experience. I'm one.
absolutely.
I've
Yep.
grown up. I'm the one the family always called either tender hearted or a titty baby. Like
Right.
I
Right.
I will cry for you.
Right.
You know.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's important for people to understand. I think there's a lot of, because of Christianity, and I'm just gonna, I'll be the one to say it, then you don't have to feel bad. Because of Christianity, people think that if you're in the spiritual realm, if you're a reader, if you are a teacher, you have to be kind of perfect.
Yeah.
And that's from the Christian theology.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
has nothing to do with what we do.
Yeah. I agree. You know, there's just so much. You really kind of have to be careful on when you begin your spiritual journey. You know, especially when we start talking about different kind of religions, and don't fall into this and don't fall into that. Number one,
Yeah.
you're going to find your own way. You're going to make your own way. What resonates with you, and don't give a shit what anybody else thinks.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you know, especially there's this boom of, and I can only talk from my own experience. There's this boom in the spiritual community where it's almost become this thing for everybody to point out, oh, you're coming from a space of ego this, ego that, ego that. You know, and when I first started out, you know, I was told that a lot of stuff was from my ego, down to like I bought the book "You Can Heal Your Life" by Louise Hay, and
right.
you know, it's a wonderful book, and it did help me a lot with identifying stuff and everything. But what actually happened to me was after about a year and a half of looking at everything I was doing in my life and being like, oh, that's my ego, I don't need to do that, or oh, that's my ego, I don't need to say that, or you know, all that. Like I ended up a sad and depressed ass person because I felt like no way that I could move was I doing anything right. And I hate to like compare it to Christianity in that way, but even if you look at it as everything we do is a sin, you know, it can be very overwhelming and very limiting in helping you progress just as a person or even having a human experience, you know?
Yeah. And as a lifelong metaphysician, and what I mean by metaphysician to people listening is energy worker, a student of the mysteries, a mystic, that kind of thing. Understanding your own personal theology is important. And what happened, because I've been at this most of my life. In the 60s, 70s, and 80s, a lot of people left the Catholic Church and the Lutheran Church, and they brought in the original sin. They brought in they also brought in a lot of psychology because they were trying to make this valid to the outside world. I'm writing about that right now in one of my guides. So they brought in this stuff, and then um, in the, let's say from the 2000s till now, in the last 20 years, a lot of people have left the evangelicals. And so they've brought in rapture theology, which is the people getting left behind. There's only so much room. Hanging on to Edgar Casey way too tight.
Oh gosh.
I'm not a fan of Edgar Casey.
Yeah.
I read his stuff when I was a kid. I got the collywobbles, and I was like, that's not the direction I'm going. And so, because it's fear-based, and so you guys have to process this a little differently. If it makes you feel bad or unworthy, it's not from spirit.
I would completely agree. And, there's, for me, it just come to a point where I kind of realize there's more to God than organized religion, than following a path where everything I do is wrong, because I'm never going to be able to live up to that. So, kind of by losing my religion in a way, um, I feel like I have found or become closer to God, Spirit, the universe than
Right.
I ever did when I identified as a Christian. And you have to understand, when I did identify as a Christian, I was one of those people that would tell you, you could walk up and threaten to hurt me, yes, this, or this is going to happen, or choose God. And I would have been like, well, I choose God,
Right.
Um,
Right.
it's like I hate to like put it this way, because I don't want anybody to feel like I'm being an asshole, but there's, I was brainwashed. Even people in my family, they attribute certain experiences in the family as it was cult like, to the point where you couldn't cut your hair and you had to
Right.
wear dresses, and
Right.
so there's a certain, you have to unlearn
Yes.
conditioning, and just all kinds of stuff. There's so much sort of religious trauma that
Right.
that comes along with it.
And it's insidious. You can have the outside obvious when you are in a more extreme version, but it's insidious in our culture as well.
Yeah.
And so that's my thing is I want people to not toss the baby out with the bathwater. There's a lot of good stuff,
Yeah, and
but
it can it can be rough, because living in Alabama, I'm a lot
uh,
of people's dirty little secret, and that
right.
is completely fine, but even that, you sit down for a reading and they kind of got this fear, like,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to check out your website, or whatever, and
Right.
they're checking it out, but I always tell them, I might as well be your doctor. Nothing you
Right.
tell me is going to go any farther than this. I am not going to judge you.
Right.
I don't give a shit if you're sleeping with whoever, or I don't care. I'm not going to judge you. We're
Right.
going to read the energy, read the cards, and I'm going to tell you what I'm getting, but
Right.
from a loving space,
Right.
and I find that even in the spiritual community, there's some people out there that like to kind of say, I'm not going to judge you, I'm not going to be judgmental and all that, but it's not really the truth when it comes down to it,
Right.
or they're not going to keep readings sort of to themselves. And you see that now on TikTok a lot, people telling stories about readings and stuff like that. And to me, it's different if you have like the sitter's permission,
Right.
but you don't know if they have the sitter's permission or not. And to me, we're in each other's sacred space. It's me, you, and spirit, and this is sacred. You
Right.
know, I don't want to use that as a means to get anywhere because I don't want to do anybody a disservice
Right.
or or try to appear that I'm something I'm not. And I have my own struggles too. Hell, trying to put myself out there more and you've been working with me trying to build me up. Carrie, come on now, come on. And but it can be scary,
It
you know.
can. Yeah. Yeah. It is, especially when there's a history of burning people
Mhm.
for what we do.
Exactly.
Yeah. For me, it's more predicting things is
Mhm.
more scary because in the history of astrology, astrologers got either put in jail or
Oh gosh.
or killed
Mhm.
for predictions. And you're
Yeah.
never 100% accurate.
No. Oh, and that's something else I tell my clients is if you go, and I'm gonna say it on the podcast here, if you go to a medium and they tell you 100% without fail that they can bring through whoever you're wanting to speak with, a specific spirit, run because they're just trying to take your damn money. Run,
Exactly. Yeah.
run.
Yeah. Yeah.
I tell them all that, because it does not work that way. We ain't bell tone, we ain't dialing a spirit. It's not a game of telephone. It does not work that way at all.
No. No. No, because I've come to you for one purpose and something else came up. It was still highly relevant. But my
Yeah.
intention for the reading was like one direction and it went totally like opposite direction. And again, it was still necessary and I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that's important for people to understand. And in astrology, when it comes to like mundane predictions, which is politics, weather, financial, I run about 87%
Yeah.
correct, and I'll be much more accurate. Like if I just do general, like, okay, this is where the energy, what it's going to feel like. But when
Yeah.
I get into the nitty gritty, like there's going to be an explosion or a chemical fire or whatever,
Yeah.
um, those will be somewhat accurate. If I try to pinpoint locations without doing location charts, I'm not going to nail it.
Yeah.
Um, Personal on the astrology, I run closer to 98%,
Yeah.
but there's still that 2%. And that's why I always invite people to correct me. Like if I'm going in, if it doesn't express that way, let me know.
Yeah.
Because then
And
it's going in the other direction.
and even in psychic work, if somebody tells you they're 100% accurate, run. They're just trying to take your money. I can't stress that enough because we are still human. Like we still screw, we still sometimes misinterpret the information or symbols from spirit because communication is symbolic at times, and it's still going to kind of, you're just not going to be 100% all the time. Just like, I don't do world predictions and stuff like that, but
Right.
I mean, I will, like me and family, will talk.
Right.
And before COVID hit, I guess about 6 months before it hit, my sister actually come to me, and it was right before the protests and stuff like that happened too. And she come to me and she told me that a time was coming in about 6 months, and it was going to be like little fires everywhere, little fires everywhere. And
Uh-huh.
then she went on to tell me, to talk about spreading, spreading, spreading. So and Mom was right there when it happened. So it was just kind of blew my mind.
Right. And
And
for our listeners, Carrie's sister is on the other side.
oh yeah, oh, sorry.
Yeah. I mean, you
Yeah.
don't need to be sorry. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
So it was this experience, and then when it happened, the thing was is I listened to her, but I didn't listen to her. I thought I was just, you know not crazy, but I up, you know what I
Right.
mean. But then when it started happening, now I know when she comes through like that to listen to what she's
Right.
saying, you know.
Right. Right. Whoa, I completely get it because I was looking at 2020 since, 1999. I had some old astrologers turn me on to it. I mean, and when I say old, I mean, a couple of those guys were in their 80s.
Yeah.
And they were like, hey, we're not going to be alive then, but you want to take a look at this because you're going to be alive and your kids are going to be alive. And this is a really important time.
Yeah.
And so we had a lot of debates. It looked like it was going to be a nuclear winter and it was terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
I had really little kids, and
Yeah.
I don't know, but I know everything's going to change and I need to, and I look nuts. I kept telling people for years, get ready, everything's going to change. And make sure you're up with technology, but you also have physical real world skills like gardening or cooking or
Yeah.
making things. And so I started teaching business, learning business and teaching business because I knew people like every institution was going to change.
Yeah.
But by 2016, I knew 2020 was coming, but it didn't look like we were going to have a nuclear war.
Mm-hmm.
So I relaxed a little.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought, well, maybe I just was catastrophizing.
Yeah.
And so I kind of went about my life. And then as we got closer in, and I worked in tech, and we were talking about COVID long before they were talking about it here because we had to get things in from China. And I went, huh, supply chain is screwed up already. Oh, I see how things are going to change.
Yeah.
And I was really, all of a sudden I start getting messages from people who thought I was crazy for years going, oh, you weren't as crazy as you thought. Oh, wait,
Right.
maybe there was something to the stuff you were saying,
Yeah.
and I was like, yeah, no shit.
Yeah.
I was,
And
so, but even I only know one person, one astrologer who really called the pandemic, like not just a time of change, not just, but that's what this person does is they're a mundane astrologer. And
yeah.
he called it, he said it was going to be like a cold or a flu, but it was worse than the flu. And he was talking about it like 3-4 years beforehand.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I still don't know why some of the main astrologers were surprised we had a systemic changing event because we were talking about this in the 90s. So I
Yeah.
was like, eh. But
It's
it also served again, like you. Well, when this comes in, listen to it, pay
right.
attention to it.
Yeah, and that's what I was
Yeah.
about to say. It's so amazing throughout history and everything else, the tools that we have been given to help us
Yeah.
make it as humans. We just have to expand our mind and think outside of the box, And another thing I tell people too is, it's always going to get better. It may not
Right.
it may not feel like right in the moment
Yep.
that it's going to get better, but it's going to get better. And even if you take those really bad moments in life and you look back at everything you've been through, all the hard times that you just thought were going to break you, that's evidence that it does get better.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And we're not here for perfect.
Exactly.
We're just not. Well, it's always such a pleasure speaking with you, my dear. And you are amazing. Where can people find you? You are on TikTok, and that's where a lot of my listeners come from. But and I will have all your links in my description, but where else can people find you?
Okay, I feel like I'm on Hot Ones when they're like, "Look at this camera, this camera, this." I don't know if you
Right.
know that, but my website is carriewilsonmedium.com. I'm Medium Carrie Wilson on TikTok and on Facebook. If you want to follow me there, I'm Medium Carrie Wilson and Inspired Spirit.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And you are
Thank you
such a
for
joy.
having me. I
Yeah.
appreciate it so much.
Awesome. And Carrie is also a patron.
I
So
am.
this is a patron spotlight.
I would not miss the patron at all. I love them horoscopes every few days.
Right. In fact, I got to go and write one because we've got Moon and Gemini coming up. So, dun, dun, dun. I would love to say the intensity will end, but here goes the roller coaster.
Oh gosh.
All right, my dear. I'm going to
All right.
end the interview. So good to speak with you, and see you on Discord.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.